Pani minister, panie wojewodo, panie ambasadorze, szanowni państwo, jest
Dear
mi niezmiernie
guests,
miło
it's a
powitać
great honor for me to welcome you here in the International Cultural Center at Rynek Główny in Krakow, all the eminent and distinguished guests, the participants of the conference, looted, recovered, cultural goods, cultural assets, the case of Poland, which is organized by the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage, together with our center, together with our eminent Krakowian partners, the Royal Castle of Wawel and the Museum of Aviation. I would like to welcome Professor Małgorzata Omilanowska, the Minister of Culture and National Heritage, who is with us today. Also, I would like to welcome the Governor of Krakow, Mr. Jerzy Miller.
Cieszę się, że przybył.
So welcome the Governor of Małopolska, and also I'm glad to see the UN Ambassador of Poland, Mr. Jerzy Winnicki. Also, I would like to welcome Professor Andrzej Rotermund, the President of Polish Committee for UNESCO. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome all 200 participants of our conference who came to Krakow, not only from Poland, all over Poland, but from 12 countries of Europe and Northern America. I would like to welcome the representative of Diplomatic Corps, the directors of cultural institutions, representatives of universities, lawyers, researchers, academics, representatives of companies in the private sector. But I would like to extend my warmest greetings to the directors of the most significant Polish museums who are significant addressees of this meeting. It is not a secret that the initiator of this meeting is Professor Małgorzata Omilanowska, who is not only an academic, but she's also the minister. And I would like to ask the minister not only to open the conference, but also to say a few words of introduction. Minister, the floor is yours. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Mr. Governor, Ambassador, the representatives of Diplomatic Corps in Poland. I see many faces that I know. I'm really glad that you responded to the invitation so warmly and so greatly, because the idea to organize it occurred a year ago, and I had the occasion and the pleasure to start works together with the Department of National Heritage, with the Ministry of National Culture and Heritage, yet in the capacity of Deputy Minister. The conference takes place already when I'm the full minister now, but this conference was my blue-eyed boy, and I worked on it even before I became the Minister of the National Heritage and Culture. I would like to explain to you why we wanted to organize this conference and why we wanted to make Krakow the meeting place of the representatives of many professional disciplines dealing with the issue of restitutions of objects of art from all over the world. Why is it so important here in Poland? Almost every specialist who deals with this problem knows it. However, the Polish special character here is of extreme importance, because as every other country in the world, we have been suppressed and looted. We also took part in some other lootings because it was the wartime custom for centuries. And Polish war losses can be named as the loss of the relics of St. Adalbert during the invasion of Brzezisław, which is the legendary moment of the loss of the gate or door in Płock. We don't know what the situation was like, but everyone believes that it was looted and it's placed in Novograd Wielki in Russia for a few centuries. But we are not claiming it, but we sustained great losses in our centuries-long history. And the issue of great Polish wartime losses of the 17th century, which occurred during the most looting deluge, which was undertaken by Sweden, and the Swedes took everything that was possible to be taken away, and all, even the things which seemed to be impossible to be taken away, because they managed to disassemble the entire castles and palaces, movable facades, and complete items. We know it very well because not a very long time ago we found under the Vistula River in Warsaw a barge which was placed there with the objects of art from our castles. But I know that Polish culture sustained the greatest loss in the recent centuries. It is because of the partition of Poland and also the removal of the objects of Polish art to Russia and to the Soviet Union. It was the first Polish significant legal experience related from the Treaty of Riga in 1921, which completed Polish-Soviet war, which allowed us to claim back many of the goods. Some of them did not return to Poland. For example, Berta Trwaldzin monument of Prince Duke Józef Poniatowski, but it was all overshadowed by the painful experience of the Second World War at its beginning, in its middle, and towards its end. Polish losses accompanied all the wartime events, especially Polish people especially remember the first looting of autumn 1939, very well organized, which was carried out with ready-made starting material, with full documentation of what is worthwhile to be taken. And these documents were made and drafted during so-called friendly visits of German art historians who visited their Polish colleagues in Poland. And Polish art historians were so naive to introduce them into Polish art heritage, which also includes the infamous activity of Professor Dagobert Frey. Not everything that was taken away by him has been returned. For example, there is no trace of the door.
Wszystko straszne pod koniec wojny, kiedy wyrabowano
from Płock. So many things were lost in an uncontrolled way. And also many elements taken from churches, museums, and also private collections. The process of the restitution of the art objects started immediately after the war, and our monument man, our representative for the monuments man, Karol Streither, seems to be the most significant person here. Thanks to his activity, many things looted during the war were returned to Poland. They were found in collecting points, but we can be sure that not everything has returned to Poland. If you compare this with the history of Poland that lost great areas of land, and because of the Potsdam decision was sort of transported, moved towards the west. So cultural resources were left in eastern borderlands, in Ukraine, Lithuania and Belarus, and also Poland entered the land, taking over the possession of the German heritage and of those which were transported towards the east with the hope of the recovery. So we would see a very complex image, a complex picture of essential problems connected with provenance research and also legal issues which pertain to claims, to restitution claims in this complex problems. The post-war restitution problem in 1945 and 1946 was quite successful, and at some point it was regarded as completed. The People's Republic of Poland stopped to claim their heritage. During the Stalinist period, we managed to regain some objects which were sent to the Soviet Union after the war. For example, the judgment. The final judgment by Memling. Also, we managed to give back to Honecker's Germany a few dozen works from German collections which were located in Poland. But before 1989, Poland has not been carrying out any research, any complex research, because the status quo, which was obtained in the Eastern Bloc, was not to be disturbed. And it was only after 1989 that Poland managed to claim back and start searching. What we have documented is 64,000 documents, but some of the documents pertain to entire collections, for example, collections of coins and medals, which were kept in Polish collections before the war, and now they are absent. So this is a great number, an overwhelming number, and it's far from being complete. We have been trying to count Polish cultural losses sustained during the last war, and this gives so large sums and amounts of money that they're impossible to be comprehended. And the majority of losses, many of those losses will never be recovered. They are lost forever, because they were destroyed, and there is no proof that they do not exist any longer. But we live with the conviction that everything what can be done must be done to get back every object that is lost, that was lost. For many observers, the activity of the Polish government might seem not very rational, because we involve great resources and efforts in claiming back our rights to the objects in foreign collections. And this is the involvement of the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Both ministries have special sections dedicated to this issue, and both ministries work incessantly following auctions, the market of objects of art, looking and searching from what might be of Polish origin. We are not always successful, because after many years it's not always possible to prove that some work comes from Poland. The academics believe that in case of repeatable objects, like objects of craft or photographs, it's virtually impossible, especially in private collections. But we take all the efforts are very important, because the meaning of those objects reaches far beyond their material value. And this is a symbolic loss, a cultural loss. But that's why every restitution of every artifact that we managed to find is a great celebration for us. It's another small victory. So no one is able to answer a question which share or which percentage of our losses has been regained. It's not about arithmetics, it's about symbols. The sense of a great loss sustained by the Poles after the experiences of the Second World War and after the losses of the 19th century period of Poland's partition is overwhelming, and social awareness of what we had and what we do not have any longer is great and it cannot be reconciled. But it is also the obligation of governmental institutions, for example, like PR institutions, which continually campaign informing Polish society about the losses from the war period, informing them about the possibilities of support for those who have lost their possessions. This is a very long and time-consuming process. But recently, this has brought some fruit, much more than in the previous years. There are many things that contributed to this success. First of all, the internet access to the visual information concerning the transactions, the sales of objects of art. For example, thanks to this information, we are able to reach many objects, but also there is a lot of civil support that we gain from the Poles, from Polish collectors, from Polish antiquaries, from average people who are simply interested in art, who follow the internet for many reasons. And also, they come across some information and they do not hesitate to inform us about it, and the ministerial services follow the events. Let me remind you that 3 months ago we received the work, the object that was stolen from the museums to the National Museum in Wrocław, which was which was regained in the way that we stopped the auction where it was meant to be sold. It was 48 hours after we got the information that this work of art will be sold. And please imagine how much involvement it takes, how many efforts are necessary to stop the auction that is in progress, proving that a work of art comes from Poland and it could be identified as Polish. It was quite surprising that the owner of this work of art decided to return it to Poland. It was a gesture of an honest man. They did not wait for the court proceedings, for all legal litigation. They simply packed it and sent it back because the collector did not want to possess anything that was looted. So, for example, 2 years ago, to Vilnius came a small painting, The Shoemaker, because the owner, the holder, found some labels and he realized that it concerned the Vilnius collections. So, such things happen because they are of special importance for me. As you know very well, last week the authorities of Saxony took the decision to return to the National Library in Warsaw the 15th century manuscript, which was sent there after the whole winding road, because it was returned to a German library from the Soviet Union. Its provenance, its labels were not properly recognized, but we managed to find it, we managed to establish its origin and claim its return, and it will arrive in Warsaw next Monday, and it will be given away to the director of the National Library. Within the last few years, we managed to gain back a few dozen works of art. It is very little in comparison with the 64,000 missing objects, but for the Poles, it is the thing of highest value, because the symbols are coming back to Poland. I said it at the press conference, but I'm going to repeat it once again. I would like everyone who possesses a Polish looted object of art, they should not rest, they should not relax and they should not sit back. We will not forget it. We will not stop searching for the objects that we have lost. This does not mean that we are not aware of the cases, of the issues that concern our collections. Sometimes I hear that Polish people are very unwilling about provenance research, and they do not want to search through their own collections with reference to the works which do not belong to us or which might not belong to us. But I believe that in the recent years we did a lot to be included in the trend of provenance research. Sometimes we proved our rights to some objects. For example, with regards to the proven provenance of the works claimed back from Germany to Poland after the owner was established. We returned it. We returned Kubert paintings from the National Museum in Warsaw. 2 years ago, we published a long, almost 100-page instruction concerning provenance research, provenance collections. And in the nearest years, I'm expecting a great change in this respect because the processes of digitalization of the records of the collections and the records will be kept in the internet. Thanks to this, we will be able to search through the collections, through the old museum collections on the internet. But Poland was not the country that looted. So the expectations of many world circles or milieux that we have some secrets that we would not like to reveal, they are in vain. We have never taken part in planned lootings. Polish museums and Polish public collections have never taken any actions, any processes like that. Let me remind you that in the period between the two World Wars, Polish government initiated the purchase of precious Jewish collections to Poland in order to render them available to the public. But on Polish lands, there were lootings, but they were undertaken by others. If in Polish collections there are objects about which people might have claims, they could be several dozen, but not hundreds and not thousands. By no means. It could be by accident that we could have somebody else's objects in our collections. It was not our policy. We have our own problems because in our collections we have the objects which came from the nationalization of private collections. So the problem with hiding these collections does not exist in Poland. Those who would like to claim that back have all the information available and they have all the legal means to claim back their possessions. We are first of all the country that has been harmed, and we are going through a very complex problem, not of historic or artistic type, but it's also of penal character, of legal character. Sometimes penal studies are necessary in order to find the labels on works of art, but also it is an important legal issue because this is the result of the operation of the national law in many countries, or to a smaller or larger degree of operation of international conventions. I would like to stress once again that the recent years have proven that the cooperation with American services has been extremely good and fruitful. This is worth observing and worth stressing, that American-Polish investigation institutions who investigate crimes against objects of art are very professional, very involved, and they are they would like to find the provenience of all the objects in questions, and they would like to return them to their rightful owners. And I would like to take this opportunity to stress this good aspect of cooperation with HSI and their great success in both police investigations and legal proceedings. It's also worth pointing out that this year, after many years interval, we have been successful to reinitiate good relationships with German authorities. In spring this year, we had Francesco Guardi Palace stairs, and we brought it from Warsaw to Krakow to show it to you, so that you could see it during your visit to Wawel Castle. And it was just a few days ago, and that we got the confirmation of the return of the manuscript. It is a good signal that we managed to be successful in our talks. I'm aware that all the 64,000 objects will never return, but some of them will. I wish you fruitful talks, and I would like to wish you a fruitful exchange of professional ideas pertaining to many aspects of restitution processes. I would like you to learn a lot and to teach others a lot. And I would like to thank everyone who was involved in the organization of this conference, and especially to International Cultural Center, directed by Professor Jacek Purchla and his staff, and the departments of National Heritage and the departments of international cooperation of the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage that was involved in the process. Thank you very much for your attention.
Bardzo dziękuję pani.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Thank you not only for this broad commentary to everything that's connected with the goal of our meeting, but also thank you for this wonderful introduction to our tomorrow's debate. Because today I've been asked to present a broader context. We are very grateful that our center has been selected to host this meeting. The center is an institution that was established in 19... And it was established also to lead a difficult dialogue. So this building located at the Market Square also brings our memory back to both looting, but also to the fact that many objects have been restituted, and the St. Mary's Basilica is one of the best examples of this. So we are very happy that, well, thanks to photographs, we can introduce you to all these issues. And the Stos altarpiece is also an example of well, everything that's connected with the tragedy of the Second World War, but also with the restored masterpieces. I believe it's not easy, especially to Krakowians, to have a brief reflection on the history of their city in the years 1939-1945. It's not easy due to various reasons. When I was looking for this broad context for our meeting, I must say that the dates are mainly remembered and viewed through the prism of the tragedy of Warsaw, the dramatic scope, dimension of everything that's connected with the word Auschwitz. And
jedyny,
against
jeżeli
this
chodzi o duże
background,
polskie miasta
Kraków
historyczne, symbol
is the
kontynuacji,
only,
choć
when it comes to big large
Holokaust
cities,
uczynił
so the only
Kraków
symbol
po
of
raz pierwszy w jego
continuation.
ponad
Although
tysiącletnim trwaniu w
Holocaust made
cywilizacji europejskiej
Kraków in its
miastem
1000 history
monoetnicznym.
a monoethnic
Ale
city.
myślę, że bez tego
However,
spojrzenia
I
na
believe that
całą
without this
złożoność
broader perspective
hitlerowskiej
of
okupacji lat
this
39-45,
complex nature
to
of
też jest
Nazi occupation of the
lepiej
years
głębiej zrozumieć
1939-1945,
tego tematu, który jest leitmotywem naszego
it
spotkania.
is easier to understand the
Zacznę od tego,
leitmotiv
że
of our
aby
meeting.
zrozumieć tą też wyjątkowość doświadczenia Krakowa
We have to remember about this
w czasie
special
II wojny
experience of
światowej.
Kraków of the Second World
To
War.
trzeba się cofnąć
And to
na
understand
chwilę
this special
i
experience,
odpowiedzieć w czasie
we
i
need
odpowiedzieć
to
na
go
pytanie,
back
czym
in
był
time
Kraków
and
u progu II
ask
wojny światowej.
ourselves what Kraków was
Tego się
at the
niewiele nie
wake
pamięta,
of
że Kraków
Second
wszedł w
World
wiek
War.
XX jako
We
miasto
must
stosunkowo
remember that Kraków entered the
niewielkie,
20th century
niewielkie
as a
przede wszystkim
relatively
skalą
small
swojej
city,
urbanizacji.
small when
Gdyby
it came
spojrzeć
to the
na
scale of
jeszcze
its
austriacką
urban
statystykę
development. If we take a look
największych
at
miast
this
środkowej
Austrian
Europy,
statistics of the largest
Kraków był
cities of
u
Central
progu
Europe,
XX wieku znacznie
Kraków at
mniejszy nie
the
tylko
turn
od
of the
Wiednia
20th
i
century
Pragi, z
was
którymi
much smaller,
mógł
not
się
only
300
than
lat
Prague
wcześniej,
or Vienna, although
spokojnie
it was
równać.
compared to those
Ale takich
cities
miast jak choćby
300 years
Triest czy Brno, nie mówiąc
earlier,
o znacznie większym
but it was also smaller than
Lwowie.
Trieste,
I
Brno
tytułem
or
uwertury,
Lviv.
krótkiego wprowadzenia czy podprowadzenia pozwolę sobie tylko przypomnieć,
So
że
as an interlude,
ten fenomen
let me just
Krakowa
remind you
przełomu
that this
XIX i
phenomenon of
XX wieku,
Kraków
jakże
of the
ważny w
turn of the
kontekście
19th
późniejszych
and
rabunków,
20th century,
to fenomen
very
austriackiej
important from the
twierdzy,
point of view of further
ścieśnionej na
looting,
stosunkowo
was this
niewielkiej
phenomenon
powierzchni,
of a
ale też
tight
fenomen
Austrian
galicyjskiej
fortress,
autonomii. My
but
właśnie w
also
naszej
of
galerii
Galician autonomy.
mamy od
In
miesiąca
our
wystawę, w której jesteśmy dumni
center,
z Galicji.
for 1 month
Zachęcamy
we've
wszystkich
had
Państwa
an
do
exhibition
jej
about
oglądania. Ona
Galicia,
próbuje
and we
zmierzyć się
recommend
z
it to
tym
you and encourage you that
niezwykłym
you see
fenomenem
it,
pamięci,
because here we try to
o
deal with this
Galicji,
phenomenon
której od 100 lat
of
już nie ma, a która spowodowała, że
memory of
Kraków,
Galicia
w
that
odróżnieniu od
doesn't
Warszawy,
exist anymore,
Poznania, też w jakimś
but
sensie Lwowa, dzięki
Galicia
tej
that made
galicyjskiej autonomii
Kraków
na przełomie
totally different
XIX
from
i XX
Warsaw,
wieku.
Lviv,
Ten
and
niewielki
other
Kraków, austriacka
cities.
twierdza,
That this small
równocześnie
Kraków,
pełnił
an
rolę
Austrian
duchowej
fortress,
stolicy
at the same time was a
narodu pozbawionego
spiritual
państwa,
capital
więc wielkie
of a
manifestacje
nation that was
narodowe,
stateless. So all the great national manifestations,
konserwatorskie przy
conservation
najważniejszych
works
obiektach.
of
I
the
przede
most
wszystkim
important
budowanie całego
monuments,
programu
and
narodowej stolicy,
also
czego świetnym
the
przykładem jest
program
choćby
of
Muzeum
a
Narodowe,
national capital.
którego tworzenie
This
połączone z
program
restauracją
was
sukiennic
established
mocno
by the
łączyło się
National
choćby z
Museum and
twórczością
also
Jana
the
Matejki,
reconstruction
tego wszystkiego, co
of the
z mitem narodowym tu właśnie w
cloth
Krakowie wówczas tak
hall
mocno tworzonym się łączy.
and
Tak więc mówiąc
Matejko
najkrócej, tytułem
masterpiece as
przypomnienia
well.
Kraków
All this was
wszedł w
important.
wiek
So Kraków
XX,
entered the second,
jako
the
ten
20th century.
paradoks tak dosadnie
interpreter
opisywany
apologizes.
przez Boja Żeleńskiego, miasto stosunkowo niewielkie, a równocześnie
A
wielkie
relatively
swoją
small
siłą
city, however, very
myślenia
powerful when it came to
narodowej
its
tożsamości, wizję Wyspiańskiego, choćby
national
wizja Akropolis są
identity.
tego najlepszym
So, for
przykładem,
example,
a równocześnie
Wyspiański's vision of
bardzo lubię
Krakow
ten
as an
obrazek, bo on
acropolis
jest świetną
is the best
syntezą
example
tego
of it. And I really
Krakowa
like this
u progu
picture
I wojny
because
światowej,
it
Krakowa,
shows Krakow
który
at the
kulminował w roku
wake of
1910
First World
tym
War,
jakże antygermańskim
which
wydarzeniem, jakim było
held this
obchodzenie okrągłej rocznicy
anti-German
bitwy
celebration,
grunwaldzkiej,
where
pomnika.
the celebration of the
Żeby doprowadzić tą uwerturę do
in
końca,
10,
wymienię
the
krótki komentarz dotyczący okresu
celebration,
międzywojennego.
the
Można powiedzieć, że był on dla Krakowa
500 years of the
kontynuacją
Battle of
zarówno jego
Grunwald
funkcji
and
matecznika
the
Polski,
unveiling of the
jak i
monument.
stolicy Młodej Polski.
So
Można
it was
powiedzieć, że międzywojenne to swoiste przedłużenie
the interwar Kraków
tego
was
fenomenu Krakowa,
a capital of young Poland, this manifestation funeral of Juliusz Słowacki, another bard, with the participation of Józef Piłsudski, show that Kraków was such a place. So all the patriotic events were continued here. And also a new legend was born here, the legend of Oleandry, of legions, and the legend of the commander, the legend of the independence. So we have to remember about everything that happened here in the 1930s. That's the last parade of the cavalry to celebrate the siege of Vienna. So briefly speaking, Kraków was a mecca of Polish national pilgrimage. And moreover, the death of Marshal Piłsudski made it even more a mecca of national pilgrimage. So the funeral was an international event. The delegation, German delegation, was headed by Göring. And also the Wawel hill was seen as a temple of Poland. And everything that was connected with the Wawel crypt and the construction of another mound that was also participated by Krakow's Jews, because Krakow was a very important center of Jewish life in two dimensions. On the one hand, it was a very important center of Zionism, and with this regard, it was different from Warsaw. And also the assimilation of Jews was quite strong here. The last pre-war mayor of Krakow and rectors of the Jagiellonian. The collection of 133 tapestries of Sigismund Augustus that had been looted by Empress Catherine returned to Poland in 1921. So Kraków was a background, for example, the oath of Polish soldiers of Jewish origin by the rabbi that you had seen on the slide. Now it is thinking about the future of Kraków did not involve great urban development, but the idea was to change Kraków into a luxury city that would connect modernity with tradition, and that would a center of a large region. Monumental Trzech Wieszczów Avenue was a symbol of that. So it was this broad boulevard where elegant architecture was located, housing architecture, but also a huge program that continued this mission and function of Kraków as a cultural metropolis. So the edifice of the National Museum, the Jagiellonian Library, or the AGH University of Science and Technology. So that was what Kraków looked like in 1939. A city of 250,000 inhabitants, out of whom 65,000 were Jews. It was a university city, and a city with a mission, a city full of treasures, not only of architectural treasures, but also museum collections and also other private collections
wojny światowej
not to mention
oznaczał
the
dla Krakowa
great
ostateczny koniec
treasures
La Belle
held
Époque.
by Krakow
1 września
churches and
1939
synagogues.
roku na
Now, the
miasto
outbreak of the
spadły
Second World
niemieckie
War
bomby,
meant
zaś generał Antoni
the
Schilling,
final
dowódca
end
Armii
of
Kraków,
La Belle Époque for
broniącej
Krakow. On the 1st
południowo-zachodniej
of September
granicy Polski,
1939,
postanowił
the
wówczas
city
oddać
was
dawną stolicę
bombed
bez walki.
by Germans,
I
and
w tym
the
tkwi pierwsza
and General
różnica
Antoni
pomiędzy
Schilling,
doświadczeniem
who
Warszawy i
defended
doświadczeniem Krakowa. Ta różnica
Krakow,
będzie miała
decided to
już
leave the
niedługo
former capital of
niezwykle
Poland
istotne znaczenie.
without any
Bo choć,
fighting. So that
kampania
was the
polska
first
toczyć się
difference in
miała
the
do
experience of
pierwszych dni
Krakow
października,
and Warsaw.
Kraków
And
został zajęty przez
this
Wehrmacht już
difference
rankiem
showed
6 września.
great importance
Miasto w
later
zasadzie nie
on.
ucierpiało.
Because although the
Zabytki Krakowa uniknęły
the
losu wielu
September
zabytków
campaign
Warszawy.
lasted until the
zbombardowanego
first
przez
days of
Luftwaffe
October,
zamku
well, Krakow was
Udało się
taken
też
on the
wywieźć z
6th
Wawelu
of
kolekcję
September.
arasów, która
Krakow was
przez
left
Rumunię i Francję
intact.
miała trafić na długie lata do Kanady.
In Warsaw,
Wrzesień
the royal castle was
1939 roku
bombed by Luftwaffe. Krakow was
przyniósł
left intact,
tylko
and also the
ponowny upadek
tapestries
państwa
were
polskiego.
taken
Ale
from
12
the
października
Wawel Royal Castle
1939
to
roku
Canada.
Hitler podpisał dekret o utworzeniu
Now, September
zwanego
1939
generalnego
brought not only the collapse of the Polish state, but on the 12th of October, Hitler decided
obejmującego część
signed
polskich
a
terytoriów
decree on
niewcielonych
the
bezpośrednio
establishment
do
of the so-called
Rzeszy.
general government,
Generalne
then
gubernatorstwo
the
poszerzone
German
latem
Nebenland
1941
that
roku o dystrykt lwowski
included
zajmowało ostatecznie
parts of
obszar
the
ponad
Polish territories that were
142
not
000
included
km²,
directly to the
zamieszkiwany
Reich.
przez około
Now,
17 milionów ludzi.
this general
Stolicą tego
government
quasi
that was
państewka
expanded
został
in
Kraków,
1949 to
a
include the
generalnym
Lviv district
gubernatorem bliski współpracownik Hitlera Hans Frank
was 142,000
odwiedzał Kraków oficjalnie jako
square
minister
kilometers
sprawiedliwości
large,
Rzeszy w
and it was
1936
inhabited by
roku,
17 million
który tu w
people.
listopadzie
Now, Krakow was the
1939
capital
roku
of this
rozpoczął oficjalne
quasi-state,
urzędowanie
and the general governor was a
Władze
close
niemieckie początkowo
collaborator
określały
of Hitler,
generalne
Hans
gubernatorstwo jako kraj
Frank,
okupowany,
who
ale już
became the
od
official
sierpnia
governor
1940
of
roku
Krakow
traktowały jako
in
część
November
terytorium
1939
Wielkiej Rzeszy, o czym
and
świadczy
established his
choćby ten
office in the Wawel
znaczek
Royal
pocztowy.
Castle. So the German authorities
Wykładając 2
initially
października 1940 roku w rozmowie
called
z
the
Hansem Frankiem
general
swój punkt widzenia na
government
przyszłość generalnego gubernatorstwa.
an occupied
Hitler powiedział
country.
między innymi,
However,
cytuję, dla
as of
Polaka może istnieć tylko jeden
August
pan, a tym jest
1940,
Niemiec.
they
Dwóch
treated
panów obok
this
siebie nie może być i
it
nie może
as a
istnieć,
part
dlatego
of
wszyscy
the
przedstawiciele polskiej
Great
inteligencji muszą być
Reich.
wytępieni. Brzmi to
And
okrutnie, ale jest to
let
prawo
me
życia.
quote
Koniec cytatu. Kilka miesięcy
Hitler,
później,
who
w
said
marcu
that
1941
for
roku, na poufnym spotkaniu z Frankiem w kancelarii
that
Rzeszy w
Poles could
Berlinie
have only one
wizja ta została
master,
znacznie
German master,
poszerzona.
and that's
Hitler
why
miał
the
wówczas powiedzieć,
representatives
że
of
generalne
Polish
gubernatorstwo może być krajem
intellectuals
tak samo
had to
niemieckim
be
jak
exterminated. Now,
Ustalono
a couple of
wówczas,
months
iż
later,
zostanie
in March
skolonizowana i
1941, at
a
a
zamiast
meeting
Polaków
with
jej obszar
Hans
zamieszka 4
Frank
do 5 milionów Niemców.
in Berlin,
Dla
Hitler
ludności generalnego
expanded that
gubernatorstwa miało
vision.
to
He
oznaczać
decided
straszliwy
that the
terror
general
nieznany w
government
innych częściach
had
Europy.
to be colonized
Kraków
and
stał się
Germanized,
szczególnym
and
celem
that it
niemieckich
should be
planów
inhabited
likwidacji
by 4 to 5 million
a jego wybór na
Germans. And
stolicę
for the
generalnego gubernatorstwa był
inhabitants
skutkiem
of general
starannie
government, it
przygotowanej
meant a
strategii.
terrible terror
Tutaj
that was
kolejny
unknown to
cytat.
other parts of
Chodziło o
Europe.
miasto
So
większe, o charakterze
Krakow
wielkomiejskim,
became this
mogące dać
particular
zdobywcom
goal
wszelkie
of
korzyści
German
wielkiego
plans
miasta,
to
a nie
exterminate
stanowiącego
the
swym
Polish
ogromem pozycji
spirit.
trudnej do opanowania.
And the
Warszawa,
selection
położona daleko
of
od granic
Krakow was
Rzeszy,
also resulted
Warszawa, miasto prawie 1,5
from
milionowe, które w
a well-planned
1939
strategy
roku
because they
złożyło dowody
wanted
swego
to
nastroju
have
walki,
bigger
odstraszało
city
Niemców zarówno
of
swoją odległością, jak swoją
a large city
wielkością.
character that
Obawiano
could
się, że trzeba
bring
będzie
the
dosyć
benefits of
długiego okresu czasu,
a big
zanim zdoła się ściągnąć do
city.
Warszawy i
However,
osiedlić tam tak
that
wielką
wasn't
ilość Niemców,
too difficult
by
to
mogli odgrywać jakąś rolę
control.
w mieście, a cóż dopiero by mogli to miasto opanować i
Warsaw,
zamienić na miasto
that was
niemieckie.
located far
Spodziewano
from
się, że
the
5 razy
borders
mniejszy
of
Kraków,
the Reich,
położony o półtorej
was
godziny drogi
too
od dawnej
big,
granicy,
and
można
it was
pochłonąć
too
znacznie
difficult for
szybciej,
Germans
znacznie
to
prędzej
turn
będzie
it
można
into
ściągać
a
tutaj
fully German
większą ilość
city.
Niemców.
They believed that Krakow, that was 5 times smaller, that was located only an hour and a half from the former border, that could actually be controlled easier, and that the Germans that would be installed in Krakow wouldn't become only a small minority, but they could actually become a majority in the city. So that was the analysis of this unexpected elevation of Krakow by Jan Dąbrowski. So this predetermined the fate of Krakow, and the goal was also to depolonize Krakow, which involved not only bloody terror, but also destruction of Polish cultural and scientific institutions. On the 6th of November 1939, the world heard about the detention of 183 professors and lecturers of the Jagiellonian University who were taken to the concentration camp Oranienburg, Sachsenhausen. So the Sonderaktion Krakow campaign was just to present this attitude of the German Reich and National Socialism to science and universities. And it was only the tip of the iceberg. The university was closed, also other schools were closed. A planned looting of works of art also commenced, and I'm sure we're going to speak about it more in the next 2 days. However, I cannot resist temptation not to show you again St. Mary's Church. The governor of the church, Professor Ryś, is with us today, and he has presented for our conference a material about an incredible series of 16th century paintings commissioned by Krakow burghers. So the paintings by Hansis of Grunbach, a student of Albrecht Dürer. These paintings are at this final stage of conservation. However, they also show a great example of that systematic looting. Well, the same happens to the Weizstoss altarpiece or the lady with the ermine. This systematic looting, which is proved inter alia by this document, shows that on the long list of our paintings to be restituted are also paintings from that series. However, not only, for example, the silver statuette of Saint Adalbert, not to mention everything that was connected with the story of Lady with the Ermine. I'm sorry, I obviously meant the silver statue of Saint Stanislaus. Now, the whole at the same time, the propaganda started that the history, the prehistory of Krakow until the era of Franz Joseph I actually was connected with Germany, and that Krakow actually attributed everything to Germany.
powiem, że z zazdrością, ale na swój
które
sposób z podziwem
tą
patrzeć,
tezę
że
i wiele
w tych
innych
trudnych
miały.
For
wojennych
example,
czasach
Frey,
w roku 40,
who was
41,
meant to prove
42,
this
tu w
thesis.
Krakowie mieliśmy
So
taki
it's
wysyp
with
różnego
some
rodzaju bardziej
jealousy, we can say that
ciekawych
in
czy bardziej popularnych
1940s, in 1940s,
dzieł
1941 or 42,
na ten temat.
we had a great
Germanizacji Krakowa towarzyszyło nasilanie terroru i
number
skoro
of
mam się
popular
wybić
and
na próbę
scientific
syntezy,
publications concerning the
to
subject.
nie możemy dotknąć
And
kwestii Holokaustu, ale
the
muszę ją
Germanization
od
of
razu, że
Krakow
powiem,
is
potraktować w
accompanied
sposób
by the
bardzo
intensification of
powierzchowny.
terrors. If I meant to
przecież jakże ważny
synthesize it,
rozdział tego
I
wszystkiego,
must
o
not
czym
forget the
będziemy
issue of
jutro
Holocaust, but I will
rozmawiać,
treat
jeżeli
it
chodzi o
very briefly.
rabunek dzieł sztuki.
And so it's a very important chapter
Cała
of the
nieomal
long story that we are going to discuss
społeczność
tomorrow,
Krakowa została
especially
wymordowana.
with regards to the
Już
lootings
w
of objects of
1940
art.
roku usunięto z Krakowa około
The
32
entire
tysiące
65,000
a pozostałych w
people,
marcu
Jewish
41
community
roku
was
zamknięto
murdered. It was already in
specjalnie do
1940
tego
that about
przygotowanym
32,000
getcie
Jews
na
were
terenie
removed from
Starego
Krakow,
Podgórza na
and the
niewielkim
remaining
obszarze, gdzie
groups were
stłoczono
enclosed
19
in March
tysięcy
1941 in an especially prepared ghetto in the territory of the Old Podgórze
14
district,
marca
where on a
43
small
roku
area
nastąpiła
the Germans cramped
likwidacja
19,000
krakowskiego getta. Ci,
people.
którzy przeżyli masakrę, umierali później w Oświęcimiu,
On the 14th March 1943, the final
szczególnie dobrze znany,
liquidation
można powiedzieć,
of
zglobalizowany
Krakow
już los
ghetto.
6 tysięcy
Those who
Żydów
survived were
przeniesionych do
dying
obozu
later on in
koncentracyjnego w
Auschwitz,
sąsiednim
Gross-Rosen, Buchenwald,
Warszawie.
Mauthausen, Bergen-Belsen and
700 z nich
Stutthof.
dożyło końca
What
wojny
is
i lista
especially
Schindlera jest
known
tego
is the fate of
najlepszym
6,000 Jews who were transferred to
Ale rzadziej
concentration
pamięta się,
lager
że sam
in
Kazimierz
Płaszów.
opróżniony jest
700 of them
żydowskich
lived
mieszkańców.
till the end of war.
Przedmiotem
Their
różnego
story
rodzaju
was presented in the film
koncepcja
Schindler's
Clemens
List.
Klotz,
But it's
proponował
very well,
wyburzenie sporej
sometimes
części
it is
tego
forgotten
średniowiecznego miasta
that
żydowskiego i
Kazimierz
zbudowanie tam
was the
wzorowej
stage
szkoły
of
dla
many
młodzieży NSDAP.
urban planning visions. For example,
Nie mówimy
Clemens
też o
Klotz planned to
zacieraniu
demolish this
systematycznym
medieval
tego wszystkiego, co z obecnością Żydów w Krakowie się łączyło.
medieval
po cmentarzu
Jewish
Remu, ale
city.
to przykład tak
Also,
zwanego
I do not mention the
domu
systematic
pogrzebowego na cmentarzu
erasure
żydowskim w Podgórzu,
of
który
the
został
traces
po
of
prostu w
Jewish
1944
presence in
roku
Krakow. For example, the Remu
wysadzony w
Cemetery or the
Jednocześnie
new
prowadzone
funeral
eksterminacje
house
ludności
in
polskiej, a
Podgórze,
szczególne represje
which was
spadały
in
na
1944 in
Jedną z wielu
July,
akcji tego
simply
rodzaju było
exploded.
aresztowanie w
At
kwietniu
the same time, the
1942 roku około
extermination
200
of
osób w
Polish
kawiarni
population
plastyków,
was
w
taking
tym
place,
bauhausowskim
especially there were
budynku, gdzie
great
zbierała się elita
attempts to
artystyczna
liquidate
miasta.
the
Wszyscy
intellectual
zostali wywiezieni do
elite. For
Oświęcimia,
example,
gdzie
the
większość została
arrests in Bauhaus Artists Cafeteria in April 1942, where the artistic elites were meeting. They were all sent to Auschwitz, where the majority of them were shot down.
Kontynuowano próbę
At the same
przekształcenia Krakowa
time,
w prastare miasto niemieckie,
which is very significant,
Deutsche Stadt
which are
Krakau.
sort of
Przybierało to
parallel
bardzo różne
the attempts to
formy.
transfer Krakow
był
into a
zamknięty.
very old
Jego miejsce
German
Kolegium Majus,
city, Uralte Deutsche Stadt Krakow, and it took various forms.
z
The
inicjatywy
university was
Hansa Franka,
closed, and its
Instytut
place
Deutsche
in
Ostarbeit,
Collegium
te
Majus
pseudonaukowe publikacje pracowników
was
Instytutu miały
the
stanowić
place
między innymi
of
podbudowę
the
dla szeregu
Institut für Deutsche
propagandy niemieckiej
Ostarbeit,
skierowanych zarówno
which
na
was
niszczenie dotychczasowej
the place of
symboliki
pseudo-scientific publication
jak i
of the
na
staff
tworzenie
of the
nowych
institute,
znaczeń i
which was
nowej
meant to
ideologii
provide
miasta.
the
I myślę, że
grounds
w
for
tym
German
tkwi
propaganda, which is
fenomen tego
directed at the
niezwykłego na swój
destruction
sposób,
of
oczywiście
the
tragicznego
symbols
doświadczenia
of Polish sanctuary
Krakowa
and the
tamtych
creation of new meanings and new
Ostentacyjne
ideology of the
niszczenie
city. And this is the
pomników to ta
phenomenon
pierwsza
of the
faza, lata
unusual and
1939-40.
tragic experience of Krakow of those
A więc całego
years.
tego programu,
For
można powiedzieć,
example,
narodowej symboliki.
the
Ale więcej, gdyby
ostentatious
rozglądnąć się po
destruction
rynku,
of
głównie w
Krakow's
Krakowie,
memorials and
to
monuments.
można
So the
może
entire
nie bez trudu
program of the
zorientować się, że
national
nie ma już
symbols.
Feniksa
And what is more,
jako
if you
symbolu
look around in the
moderny
market
przełomu lat
square,
20. i 30.
you could see
Feniks został uznany za
that
artetę Kunst.
there is no longer Phoenix as the symbol of art moderne of 1920s and 30s. Phoenix was regarded as an artete Kunst, and the majority of the Krakow inhabitants are not aware that it is the object of art inspired by Dr. Hans Frank. It is a challenge for the debate of conservators.
Przemianowanym na Adolf Hitler Platz.
Also, the cityscape has changed from the Potocki Palace in Main Market Square, whose name was changed into Adolf Hitler Platz, where the authorities of Krakow districts were housed.
Więcej, Kraków stanowił naturalną scenografię
To the number of some other buildings. This is the Ministry of Propaganda, and this is so Krakow was a natural scenery for many manifestations, parades, organization of various meetings, gatherings, and military parades, which is very well documented in German photographs. So this is the march very close to our center, and in the background you could see the building of Krakow International Cultural Center, which during the war served the function of the seat of the Nazi Party for the entire general government, including Warsaw District. This is the room where we are sitting right now, and there are numerous photographs whose collections we hold, and preparing this presentation shows that the best documented period are the periods between 1940 and 44. I'm not showing this photograph to amuse you, but to show the absurd of the radical change of the transformation of the sanctuary of Poland into the exemplary German city in the east. The yard of the Wawel Castle was the great scenery for many marches, parades, party celebrations. This was the place of the transfer by Frank to Malbork of Teutonic Knights banners. And Wawel Castle was also meant as a political object because, apart from the Poles, Jews and Germans during the Second World War, there was an extremely important community among the citizens of Krakow were the Ukrainians. Before 1941, Krakow was the center of Ukrainian political life. These are the Ukrainian celebration of harvest, and it's everything that is connected with the doubtful honor of performing the function of a capital. The city has become the seat of many central offices. There were hundreds and thousands of officers coming from Germany together with their families. Krakow was full with German uniforms. About 50,000 inhabitants were Germans who came to Poland, officers, first of all, military officers, policemen and artists. In Dr. Hans Frank opened the concert hall of General Government, which is still placed as a Polish concert hall, memorial to Karol Szymanowski in the building of Catholic Action. So it employed Vienna musicians with Hans Swarowski, who is shown here in the photographs. Krakow was divided into 3 zones, and before it was divided, it actually increased its square area. As a historian of the city, I must know that in June 1941, there was the largest in Krakow's history enlargement of the city borders. The capital city required such an enlargement, didn't it? But Krakow was divided into 3 zones, which is shown found on this map. It was purely German, mixed and Polish. The ghetto, which is marked in yellow, was really crammed, and it was the fragment of the old Podgórze district on the other side of the river Vistula. Germans were gradually occupying the most modern districts in the western part of the city, close to the Avenue of the Three Barns. And this was the creation of the quarter near für Deutsche, connected with so-called Regierungsviertel, which is the government district. And Hans Frank ordered to occupy the most representative buildings at the Three Barns Avenue. It is our National Museum changed into the military casino, the Academy of Science and Technology, which is the seat of the general government authorities, and the Jagiellonian Library used its reading room as the seat of the Academy of Administration. And this is the speech of Hans Frank to the participants of this teaching process. I would like to say that Krakow, during the Second World War, was the city with a lot of investments, especially in the characteristic German residential district along the contemporary Królewska Street, also in Przegorzały, in the Institute of Art History, in the current Institute of Art History, which was killed in between 1942-43 as Schloss Wartenberg, which was donated by Frank to Himmler, and it was used as the rehabilitation house. So we have the archives of the Third Reich, which touched also the Kassel Hill. And this is the essence, this is the point of my presentation today. To close, I would like to tell you about what we know very little about, that is, in what degree Krakow, in its dimension, in its urban dimension, fit into the large program of Nagelstandtuch Deutsche Städte, which was announced by Hitler in October 1939. This program became the basis for the preparation of great plans of transformation of 40 largest cities of the Third Reich. The special place was occupied by Berlin, Munich and Nuremberg, and also after the Anschluss of Austria, Linz, which were called as Führer's city. And in summer 1940, together with Strasbourg and Luxembourg, was on the list of Gaubhauptstädte, which were the German cities, the Reich cities, which were meant to receive the new urban planning cut. The defeat of France meant the change of the concept towards the occupied territories in the east. On the 8th of July, Hans Frank talked with Hitler in Berlin about the future of general government. The change of the concept of treatment of general government from the occupied territory to the area elevated to the rank of the part of the Third Reich, end of quote, was led also to the creation of the new urban vision of Krakow as the Nuremberg of the East, the seat of the government and central offices of the Nebenland. In the case of Krakow, it was not only about the transfer to the city over Vistula of the Nazi model of the transformation of the great cities of the Third Reich, but also the use of the urban planning as the tool of Eindeutschung, which was the intensification of the policy of depolonization of Krakow. The enthusiast of the policy of the Germanization of the general government was Hans Frank himself. When referring on the 12th July 1940 in Krakow, when discussing his Berlin meeting with Hitler, Frank said, quote,
stanowi dla
"The
mnie
fact
wyraźny
that
dowód, jak
Führer
bardzo
was
Führer
interested
życzy
in the
sobie,
issue of the
żeby z
castle,
pełną
the
rozmachą
construction
budował
of new
niemieckiego
public
państwa
houses and
światowego,
clubs in
szły też
district
w parze
cities,
szeroko
for
zakrojone
me
posunięcia w tym zakresie.
is a clear proof
Führer
how
interesował się
much
bardzo
Führer
naszymi zamierzeniami
wishes
w dziedzinie
that
kultury.
the creation of the
Musiałem złożyć
German
sprawozdanie o
world
planach na odcinku
state
teatru.
was
Führer
followed
powiedział, że
by
uważa
concrete
Zamek Wawelski za
plans.
wspaniały
Führer was
odpowiednik katedry w
interested in our
Strasburgu
cultural plans.
i że od
I had to
Strasburga poprzez
report
Norymbergę i
about
Pragę
our
aż do
plans
Krakowa
concerning
biegnie
theatre.
imponująca
Führer
linia
said
niemieckiej
that he
świadomości
believed
kulturalnej
that
i
Wawel
niemieckiej
Castle
symboli
was the
niemieckiej
great
potęgi.
equivalent of Strasbourg Cathedral,
Nie przypadkiem
and from
więc właśnie
Strasbourg
w
through
lipcu
Nuremberg and Prague
1940
there is an impressive line of German
Hubert
cultural awareness and
Ritter,
symbols of German power. It was not by accident that
Lipski
in
architekt
July
otrzymał
1940
z
Hubert
Reichsministerium w Berlinie
Ritter,
zadanie przygotowania
an architect from
tego
Leipzig,
Generalbebauungsplan von Krakau, który
received
już w maju
from
1941 roku
Reichsministerium
był
in Berlin.
gotowy.
He was
Ja chcę w tym
entrusted
miejscu
with a
skorzystać z
task
okazji i
of
podziękować panu
preparation of
profesorowi
General
Wolfowi Tegethofowi,
Gebauungsplan
dyrektorowi
von
Centrali
Krakow,
Instytutu
which was
Kultury
ready
w Monachium,
already in May
za pomoc, jaką mi okazał
1941.
przed 10
Here I would
laty
like
w
to take the
dotarciu do tych
opportunity and
planów,
thank
które w
Professor
Krakowie
Wolf
były
Tegethoff, which is
nieznane.
the director of the
Ritter był
institute in Munich,
wybitnym
of the Kunst Institute in Munich, who reached those plans which were not known in Krakow. Ritter was an eminent urban planner and architect, and he had a great career of the chief architect of Leipzig. In Leipzig, he won his name for the creation of great halls for Leipzig fairs, which were at that time of great importance with regards to the modernity of the construction of the state of the art. And also he studied together with Ernst May and other representatives of the German Bauhaus, which is evidenced by Rundling, which is the residential estate in Leipzig, which was designed by Hubert Ritter just before the war. For Krakow, he had some other ideas, which were some competitive in comparison to what was already prepared in Krakow. So the idea to use, for example, Krakow-Błonia meadow for the governmental district with the Kościuszko Mount, which was meant to be liquidated, to be pulled down, and which was meant to cross with the ring, which was already prepared by Frank for the function of the governmental district. The plan, Hubert Ritter's plan, it could be read in many aspects today. Although it was, Ritter referred to the pre-war concept of the development of the city, which was included in Dziwoński Polish plans from 1939, and he used those plans in many points, but in some other points it contained some original analysis and original ideas which seem to be interesting from the point of view of the city as such. But what is the most original and most interesting part of Ritter's plan is the idea to create the representative governmental residential estate in Dębniki, one of the quarters of Krakow.
Miała być ona alternatywą do tych wcześniejszych koncepcji
So
zabudowy.
it's like in front of Wawel Castle.
Prestiżowa
This was meant to be an alternative from the previous concepts of the development of Błonia. The prestigious location, which was based on Ritter's search of the correct relation and communication with the historic center of the city, and the values, urban planning values of the river windings, were the basis for the idea of Dębniki, the flagship of New German town, New German city in the east, of 250 hectares. In the concept of Ritter's, this German governmental district was meant to perform administrative functions as well as representative ones, being the workplace for about 10,000 officers.
kolei
In
i
the
innych
functional
urzędów
program
generalnego gubernatorstwa
of the
przewidziano m.in.
Regierungsviertel,
kampanię
apart from the
tereny
seats of
rekreacyjne i
government
sportowe.
administration, Nazi party
A w
post
centralnej części
office,
dzielnicy
German rail
przy
and
jej
other offices of the general government,
głównym
there were
placu
plans for
stanąć miała
canteens, for casinos, recreation and
monumentalna
sporting areas, and in the
miejsce
central
wielkich
part of the
nazistowskich
district,
zebrań i
at its
uroczystości,
main
główna
square,
świątynia
there
miasta.
was meant to be
Program funkcjonalny
the
tego
monumental
Regierungsviertel wyraźnie
fest hall,
podporządkowany został
the
swoistej
place for many
sakralizacji
Nazi
projektowanej
gatherings
przestrzeni,
and
w której
celebrations, the
dominującą
main temple of the city.
zgodnie z
The
hitlerowską
functional
nauką
program of
narodowo-polityczną
Regierungsviertel was subjected to special
przestrzenią miały być
sacralization of the
rozległe place
design
zebrań i
space,
place
in which the
place
dominating role, in accordance
Uderza
with the
osiowość,
Nazi
skala,
national political
monumentalizm całego
science,
założenia.
was to be played by
A
large and
model,
vast gathering places and parade
Nowych Dębnik
places.
kojarzyć się może z próbą
The
rekonstrukcji
axiality,
pod
scale, and
założonego
monumental
na planie
character
kwadratu
are
miasta
striking.
idealnego z epoki
The model of
antycznych.
the new Dębniki
Rozpoczęta
might
przez
be
Niemcy w czerwcu
associated
1941
with an
roku
attempt to reconstruct
ofensywa na
under
wschodzie
the Wawel Hill
szybko odsunęła poważne
the reconstruction
myślenie o
of an
realizacji
ancient
planów
city.
Huberta Rittera dla
The
Krakowa. Klęska pod Stalingradem
new
faktycznie je przekreśliła, choć dalsze studia
offensive operation
prowadzono
in
Krakowie
June
do roku
1941 in the
1943
east pushed aside the plans,
wraz z
the Ritter's plans for
wypadkiem
Krakow. The
hitlerowskich
Stalingrad
Niemiec
defeat actually was the end
te
of those plans,
pełne
although they
megalomanii
were
plany
still
administracyjnego
continued
centrum
until 1943.
generalnego gubernatorstwa
Together with the
stanowiły-
downfall
straciły
of the Nazi
swoją
Germany, the megalomania
Ale
plans
ten
of the
model
creation of the
zachowany na
administrative
fotografiach,
center
model
of the general
faszystowskiego Forum
government
Romanum w sercu
lost
Matecznika
its
Polski
appeal.
pozostanie jednak jedną z najbardziej
But
spektakularnych
this
wizji
model,
urbanistycznych w
which
historii
was
III Rzeszy.
preserved on the photographs of the Nazi Forum
co
Romanum in the heart of
istotne,
the sanctuary
ta
of
koncepcja
Poland,
niemieckiej
has
dzielnicy
remained
rządowej
the
na
most
Dębnikach swoją
spectacular urban
spektakularnością
vision in the
blokuje
history of
Kraków,
Third
mówię to bez
Reich.
cienia
What-
dumy z
Ta
tego
koncepcja
powodu,
What is
również wieloma
important, that
niemieckimi
concept of creating a
metropoliami,
governmental
które były
quarter
przez III Rzeszę
in Dębniki
Kraków nie został
put Krakow
Norymbergiem Wschodu.
on the par with other
podzielił
German
też
metropolies
losu
that were
Norymbergi.
redeveloped by the Third Reich. Krakow did not become the Nuremberg of the East. It didn't share the fate of Nuremberg either.
hitlerowskich gospodarzy. W
In
ciągu zaledwie
January
kilkudziesięciu
1945, also the building in which we
nasze miasto
are
przeszło jednak
now
znamienne
was
doświadczenie.
left by the
Matecznik Polski,
Hitler hosts,
Polska Akropolis,
and in
kolebka polskiej
several
niepodległości roku
tens
1918.
of years, our
Poddana
city
została w
has
latach
gone through some significant
1939-45
experiences.
próbie
So the
tragicznej czy
statue of
absurdalnej.
Poland, the
Wyjątkowość tej
Poland Acropolis,
Nie ma w
the cradle of
skomplikowanej historii
Polish
uroku
independence of 1918,
12 stycznia
was,
1945 roku z nadśrodkowej Wisły ruszyła zimowa ofensywa Armii Czerwonej.
underwent a
17
very
stycznia jednostki pierwszego frontu
tragic
ukraińskiego podeszły pod
experience in
Kraków.
1939 and
18
1945.
stycznia
And
wojska
it is
Armii Czerwonej
unprecedented
59.
history
Armii zajęły
in the history of
historyczne
Central Europe.
centrum.
In summer 1944,
W ten sposób
Germans
dobiegł końca trwający
began to
1961 dni
prepare
okres wymuszonej
the defense of
stołeczności
Krakow because
było
the Red
wówczas
Army was
poddane
approaching,
nie tylko
and
brutalnemu terrorowi, ale jego
for
szacowne mury
many
stały się
months
ofiarą bezprzykładnej
the
próby
city
wydziedziczenia.
constructed the
Dlatego też
fortification
Kraków, choć
called
szczęśliwie
the
przechował
Eastern
swą
Fortification.
jest
So in November,
równocześnie wyjątkowo czytelnym
the
przykładem miasta
Wehrmacht in
ofiary
Krakow
ideologii, które jednak
included
obroniło
25,000
swoją
people.
tożsamość, choć
And
bronić jej musiało
although
dalej.
Krakow,
To jest puenta, bo przecież
well, didn't
rok
change its
później, na
face. It
przełomie
is an example
kwietnia i maja
of a victim that
1946 roku
defended its
na dworzec główny w Krakowie
identity, although it had to keep defending it,
niezwykły pociąg,
although
który
in
collecting point
on the 3rd of May
przywiózł
1946
tu do
to the
Krakowa
main railway station in Krakow, an unusual
pani
train
minister
came
zmieniła dzisiaj już
where
imię i nazwisko mojego
from the collecting
profesora
point
Karola
brought to
Streichera.
Krakow The
On w taki
treasures,
sposób stał się obok
Madam
damy i
Minister
ołtarza Wittenstwosza
mentioned the
symbolem i
name
ikoną
of my professor,
tego
Karol Estreicher,
powrotu. Ale
who
paradoks tego powrotu polegał
next to
na tym,
Weizsto's altarpiece and the lady with the ermine became the symbol or the icon of this restitution. And the paradox of this restitution was that on the 3rd of May 1946, in the market square of Krakow,
nowym
the first
reżimem.
or the last
trzeciomajowe, krwawe
large
wydarzenia,
confrontation
brutalnie stłumione
between
przez
the
wojsko
citizens
i
and the new
Służbę
regime
Bezpieczeństwa,
took place.
miały swój
The
moment
bloody
kulminacyjny
events
znowu
of the
w tym
3rd of
budynku, bo w
May,
tym budynku już
very
wówczas była
brutally
siedziba Polskiej Partii
suppressed
Robotniczej.
by the
Prawem
army and
przechodniości
by
z
the
okien naszego budynku
security
strzelano do
services culminated
studentów.
in this very building, because
Ta
this building
demonstracja, która w
housed
sposób oczywisty i naturalny
the
chciała wrócić
seat
do
of the Workers'
celebrowania
Party of
święta naszej
Poland,
konstytucji,
and
symbolu
students
wolności,
were shot
organizowana
from
była przez
the windows of
bratniaka,
this
której
building.
wówczas wiceprezesem
So,
był
well,
kleryk.
the
Ten kleryk
citizens
nazywał się
wanted to
Karol
celebrate
Wojtyła. Można powiedzieć,
the
że w ten sposób historia naszego miasta
establishment of our constitution of the 3rd of May, a symbol of independence.
a w tym
And,
rozdziale szczęśliwie Kościół mariacki i jego
Citizens organized the
wielki
celebration.
Są
It
już
was organized
zapisane
by
po
the
stronie
organization
sukcesu.
called
Czekamy
Brotherly
na dalsze.
Assistance,
Dziękuję bardzo Państwu
and
za
it
uwagę.
was headed by the clergyman Karol Wojtyła, the future John Paul II. Thank you very much for your attention, ladies and gentlemen.